just a weird scene. We'll talk about it
Okay.
later. But I'm probably gonna give this one probably 7
Okay.
for me.
Now,
The other one I
just
gave it
want to let everybody
yeah.
remind everybody of our original verdicts.
Original.
When we were drunk, original, we were drunk. We hung out with Nikki, and we had a bunch of drinks. We had some friends. So we were like, we just want to
That
laugh
always
and be
makes-
better and have it be lighter. We got our ratings wrong, and I feel bad about that.
Obviously.
It was like
Well,
7. We
now-
rated it like a 7
Now
and
it's
8.
a 7.
Right? But then when we re-reviewed it and watched all the DCEU films ranked, it was the worst one when we rewatched it. 4 out of 10. So now you go up 3 points from
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, 7. 7 out of 10 for Joe.
Yeah, the fights were way better. It was still kind of cringy with the music and the introduction to some of these. These still didn't have the chemistry that I wanted.
Yeah.
Left me with some questions at the end. It's kind of weird, but overall, like,
Yeah.
but,
It's like,
But again, I gave it a 7 also because it's like 4 hours. It's like, are you gonna say, hey, let's watch this movie? 4 hours.
yeah, it's tough to get this together and
it
watch with
is.
friends.
It
But, I mean,
is.
we did it.
But yeah, I'm glad I watched it. It's still, I still enjoyed it, but 7 overall.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right about there. I enjoyed this one far more than I thought I would. I'm glad that there's a lot more footage. Ultimately, I think the storyline, it hits all the same story beats, so you're not going to be super surprised by anything. So you kind of get to compare them as close to apples as you can, because it's not wildly different. You know, there's not, no meteors coming to Earth or anything like that. So the major beats are still there. It was very long, and for something that is that long, I did expect a little bit more.
Yeah.
I know he didn't have the opportunity to film more, and they were doing the best they possibly could, but we can't. I'm not going to take that into consideration. That is not on the burden as the consumer or the critic for me to bear that they couldn't, get this thing figured out before. There are a ton of scenes in this movie that didn't need to be there. There was a couple scenes that needed to be extended, and there's a lot of things that needed to be worked on. So if we compare this to like everything in the DCU, like we would every single movie, it is above average. I don't think this breaks the top 3 in DC. It's definitely in the top half. So I think that it's probably, I could say that it's about a 7. It's a good movie.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I like this one way more than y'all. I'm trying to go between an 8 and a 9. I'm trying to taper my excitement for how well Superman was handled and how much extra context. And goddamn, Zack Snyder knows how to do action scenes. He knows how to do visuals. That's what Zack is good at. And he's not that great at the story. And I felt like the story lacked in Whedon's version. But here, the story was closer to what I've seen before in the comics and in DC animation. So I'm between an 8 and a 9. I think ultimately I am going to go with an 8 because of some of those limitations. It's 4 hours long. Does this work as, in this? And some of the comedy was a little off, and like the music and some of the things that I will talk about in the spoiler section. But I just love it way more, the fact that there's Darkseid in this. Now, I have my own problems with the way Darkseid was depicted, and maybe he would be fleshed out in future versions. And here, he's more like a brute, but he's still that powerful Darkseid that I know.
Sweet lasers.
But it's just way more appropriate to the universe that I'm used to. And then also there's an 8 in there. I can't go 9 because I'm thinking, shit, here we go. The direction that I fucking hate, and I always hate, Injustice, and that's where they were going with this and where Zack was taking it. Now, that's not to say that if it does happen, I don't know if this film can force that to happen. Get us to get Zack to have a part 2, and do the Injustice storyline. And I'm saying for those of crazy Zack Snyder fans that are about to shit on me for saying like I don't like Injustice, I might like it if it's done well enough. And you can do Superman justice, and he can become a hero again after being evil, though in the comics he's just straight up evil. But anyways. So I see the potential there. And if it was done as well as this was done and Zack was allowed to finish and do his part 2, I'm for it, right? I would like to see I'm just interested so that I can get an opportunity to shit on it or I can get an opportunity to enjoy it because I think Zack's visuals are good enough to that I would be interested. Do I think it's going to happen? No, it sucks because I do,
No.
I don't think it's going to happen. Who knows? Maybe if this is super popular, you know, they could do multiverse and they could say, Zach, you can have your own Injustice and we can do all these other films. But honestly, I'd rather see what they also set up here is they also set up Ben Affleck's Batman, which we know we're never going to see. And what they plant the seeds here, I would have rather have seen Ben Affleck's Batman than Robert Pattinson Batman. Just from hearing about both ideas, I would much rather have Ben Affleck's Batman. So that tells you something. And then, so I would want to see Injustice. So 8 out of 10. Superior version in almost every way to Whedon's version, making this a Justice League that is that I was hoping for and waiting for. It's just the directions that they chose aren't the directions that I would have chose. Like spending Superman's death so fucking early, bringing in Darkseid so early without individual films, and then getting that out of the way. Or Steppenwolf, which by the way I like the Steppenwolf's redesign here. I like the way he looks here as a CGI bullshit versus his previous CGI bullshit. But he's a little bit more of an unintelligent brute compared to Whedon's version, but I still like him better in Zack Snyder's version. So 8 out of 10. Let's go and talk about all the different spoilers. So, well done, Zack Snyder, and I'm hoping that this might actually lead to something because he clearly is setting up. He clearly did extra scenes, right? And you've seen it in the trailer, okay? So it's not that huge of a spoiler that Batman meets Joker here. And they are setting something up, and I would like to see it pay off.
Just re-sign Henry and re-sign Cyborg.
Yes, if this leads to Henry being re-signed, this is a 10 out of 10. But for now, it's an 8 out of 10, and we'll talk more in spoilers. So thank you guys so much for watching. Grab your tubs of G Fuel now down below. I want to thank G Fuel for keeping us up watching
4
6 hours. No, I watched 6
you did
hours
6.
of Justice League.
You did it to yourself.
I know, but thank y'all so much, and we'll see you in the spoiler section. It's gonna be a separate video because it's gonna be long. All right, bye guys.
Bye, guys.
He can buy some face. It's really no. What was I going to say?
It's, Courtney Hope is the lead in Control.
Yeah, it's. I think what I love about Control is that it kind of demonstrates how often we underestimate that mainstream audience. Like you can give them something that's bold and interesting, and they won't freak out. Like you can actually make something cool. I think a lot of the time we kind of go, well, this is this stuff's indie, it's cool, it's weird, but no one will buy it. And then you see something like Control come along and just be exactly what it wants to be, and the audience go with it because the audience is much smarter and much more engaged than we I think give them credit for a lot of the
I
time.
think that we broadly I think that's very, very true. And I think that even games that you would use as the stand-in for like mainstream takes no risks, it's not even true for those games. Like I always used to hold up Call of Duty as the Transformers of video games. Like they churn them out, they are predictable, but truth is those are very, very well made games, and they do occasionally throw down, like I'll never forget probably for the rest of my life that fucking terror, like undercover terrorism airport thing in Modern
Russian?
Warfare.
Yeah,
like that to me was for a game to be so utterly mainstream, to make such a bold choice. And they've done other things.
I think the Call of Duty campaigns are great.
Can I
I
add
was getting
something to
every year
that?
for the campaign.
Yeah, as our resident hardcore Modern Warfare fanboy.
Wait, which one are you in, Troy? Which
Well,
one's the one you were in?
I
All
was
of them.
in all of them up until then I get put in jail after the one with Kevin Spacey. And then made all of them up until then I get put in jail after the one with Kevin Spacey. and then
Delivery
made my
on that. Jesus.
You know what I liked about that for our viewing audience was that you covered your mouth but like protected the microphone. You did it on the other.
You don't even
like,
That's
see this.
professionalism. You can't teach that. That is his
my
talent.
God.
That is his skill.
So funny story about that. I played Joseph Allen in that. So I'm the character that you're playing when you go in for No Russian.
And your likeness as well, right? Like your.
No, for Advanced Warfare, that was my likeness.
That's
but
Advanced Warfare,
in
wait, the player character is you?
Modern
in that?
Warfare 2. Well, in Advanced Warfare, I was the player character, and then also in Modern Warfare 2, and then for the No Russian level, I played Joseph Allen, who you go in as, and you're going to infiltrate the whole Russian regime, and you're going to go through. And the reason why it's called No Russian is because in the elevator, when you come out, this says, remember, no Russian. And they're not supposed to talk in Russian because that was the whole thing, is that they were doing this terrorist hit. So I remember going through, and they were like, so here's the mission. And they laid it out for me, and they started playing through it. I was like, holy shit, really? This is what we're going to do? Like, yep, this is what we're going to do. And I was like, man, that's insane. Cut to, we are in Vegas because historically that's where IW especially would do all of their big launch parties. We would go to Vegas, they'd put everybody up. It was really cool. It was a big celebration. We would rent out the foundation room at the whole strip. They would rent out the foundation room at House of Blues or whatever, and it was just a big celebration of everything. And we found out that post launch, well, right before launch, but like they had already gone gold, that Russia was going nope, and they were basically what's it called when you boycott a game? Boycotting a game.
Yeah.
That's the word we use.
Blacklisting.
So they had to. Everyone was scrambling like that, and so that's when they had to put the warning on it. So the warning actually was a patch that they did after they went gold, and they had to like make nice with everyone's like, well, no, this is a whole thing. It's like it's a fictional world. You know, you've done this with movies and everything, but they like whoa, that's a really terrible thing because you just go through and you can't not shoot. It was like almost a harbinger for what they did in The Last of Us, to where you get put to a decision and at the end,
you know, the other thing that to me was such a stroke of horrifying genius about that level was that you can't run either.
It's a walk.
You move so slowly, and so it's like you're forced to confront what you're doing, and it succeeded in not glorifying it as a result, because it was like, you're going to do something that really turns your stomach, and we're going to make you really digest it. That was one of those moments that I thought, holy hell. And hats off to that was actually Hans and Lauren Balfe on that score, and that whole cue is just like an unsettling drone. It's like it's just like this. There's none of that sort of Hollywood action. It's just pure sit in this moment, and we're going to tip the scales to the idea that this is not a good thing, but we're mostly going to leave it ambiguous, and you're just going to have to live in it. And I was like, this is supposed to be the pure popcorn franchise, you know? And that's what I mean, Mike. Like, even a game like that, you know, or obviously we've talked before here about Death Stranding or even The Last of Us, that games that like are positioned
and
very
some
mainstream.
games that Troy's not in as well, right? There are some games I think that Troy's not.
There was rumor.
No.
It's like the ET games that are all in the landfill. Like there is rumor of non-Troy games, but I'll have none of that. Thank you.
That's why I push against the notion that like Call of Duty is this, Transformers of.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not. I stand corrected in my years past assertions of that, because.
And also, I don't know if you played the most recent one. Like I think we've talked about this before, and I hope nobody at Sledge gets mad at me, but the original ending of Advanced Warfare was one of the best I've ever seen, to where you run in and you're in these exosuits or whatever, so you get frozen, which is just completely convenient, whatever. But it allows Kevin Spacey's character to have this big monologue about every movement needs a martyr. And the end scene is him walking up to you, putting the gun in against his own forehead. He goes, "I want you to understand. I know what I'm doing." And you pull the trigger, or he pulls the trigger, and he assassinates himself so he could set off this event that he's a martyr for this thing. I was like, holy shit. They're like, no, it can't be that. So they ended up doing this big chase, and the ending that is in the game is what it is. But like that, the story that was in that, where it's like, Call of Duty has consistently like dealt with topics that I like. What would it take to set off a nuclear war? Like, what would it take for us to really go? And it would be the fact that a regime murdered people in an airport, like innocent people in an airport. That would tip the scales towards this global war. Or what would happen if private military became too powerful and became their own kind of national state, and they were able to do this? It's what Advanced Warfare posited. And then with the most recent one, where it's just Modern Warfare, when they brought it back, I was like, dude, it is just the story that they told, and the amount of empathy that they were able to put in that Taylor Kurosaki, Brian Bloom, the people that were in charge of the creative there, that game, if you haven't played the campaign, it was the first campaign that I've really, really enjoyed in a long time. World War II was great because it's super nostalgic, and it brought me back to what Call of Duty and Medal of Honor originally was.
No, but I agree that, and similarly, the Piccadilly
So
Circus stuff was like, as someone who has spent time there, obviously, I think maybe all three of you have probably spent more than me there, but I've logged some serious time in that city, and I love that city. And there's a gut reaction, revolt and disgust and sadness, even in the context of like, it's fun shooty game, like it still manages to kind of it's damn impressive. It's really they
The
do good
pace of
work.
that game is amazing. It is just like, here we go, and it just doesn't let up. And the whole embassy level is one of my favorites. Just like, anyway, I can't say enough good stuff about that game.
What so then, out of curiosity, what would be, if there is a Transformers of games, is there even like a good example then of something that's just like, we don't want to ruffle any feathers, so here's generic number 20 again? Like, I'm finding myself having a hard time thinking of.
I feel like games are so hard to make that I'm like uncomfortable suggesting that anything is that, but I suppose if there is a parallel, it would be
movies.
mobile games, in theory.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be disparaging, but I mean, I wouldn't say a mobile game is that, because let's define what a Transformers game is, right? Or a Transformers movie.
I'm just annoyed that you're all disparaging the fine work of the people at Hasbro. To be honest, I'm still getting. Like, as someone who owns as many Transformers as I have behind me here, I'm kind of like.
What I'm saying is that the.
What's that, Mirage? You feel
big,
that this is an unfair
Wow.
conversation?
Oh, Mirage, a great one. Something
my
that
these,
is
not just books on the magic shelf.
Also
Sure.
Transformers.
Actually, the thing that's amazing is
Also
that your
Transformers.
Mirage is holding a small book. So.
yeah, that's,
He
and
is,
the book
he
that
is.
he's holding is a picture.
It's about Call of Duty.
Exactly.
That. So I mean, it would have to be all spectacle, right? No substance.
Yeah, and it's like big, and that's the thing for me. It's about, like, to me, mobile
PlayStation
game.
Optimus.
Oh my God.
Wow,
I
that's-
love
that's
that.
a deep cut.
That's impressive.
He transforms
Mike
into a
Bithell.
PlayStation 1, yeah.
Oh
It's cool,
my
right?
gosh.
That rules.
Isn't that neat?
Is it playable? Well, can you like play Metal Gear Solid on
Yeah,
it?
no, it's 100% playable.
Otherwise, it's garbage.
Annoyingly, it's not got analog sticks, so it's not quite the same. And
exactly.
There you go. See, bring it back.
Um,
There you go.
the Transformers of video games. Again, I feel like uncomfortable with the idea because games are so goddamn hard to make. But like, could it not be a Candy Crush?
The thing is, the reason why that for me feels difficult is a lot of those games, they're designed to be as quickly iteratable as possible, and a Transformers. The thing is, those aren't easy to make.
They're not cheap. No, it's true.
They're not cheap, and like, if nothing else, the visual effects work from people like ILM is.
I was gonna
is
say,
next
like,
level.
Yeah.
I know some of the
Consistently.
guys who've worked on those, and I mean, they take it seriously. Like the guys, they're not good stories. I
I'm
think
not
everyone knows
shitting
that,
on
like,
them. They're
know.
awesome. They're fun.
It's not that they're not. It's not that I'm. I don't. Hopefully, it doesn't sound like I'm shitting on it. It's just, what's an example
course.
of something that it feels like we're here to be successful and we're not here to kind of provoke you to think about life or to be the art. It's like 2 hours of pure escapism, you know?
Annualized sports games, then.
Yeah,
right? Like
FIFA.
that's what you're saying.
But I guess like story-wise, I feel like there are a lot of the more recent Ubisoft games pretend to be political, but don't ever actually make any kind of political statement. As an example, they touch on it and then they bail.
Assassin's Creed, would that kind of fall into that role, or just
That's
being like
I kind of think so. Yeah.
I'm not not shitting on it. I'm just saying.
No,
like,
I mean
it's just pure popcorn.
I love the
fun.
recent Assassin's Creed games. I really like them. I gave Origins a 9. I think I really enjoyed it. Odyssey's dope too, but yeah, I liked Origins a lot. Ubisoft has blacklisted me though, so I don't get anything from them anymore, and they don't invite me to events, even though I gave it a 9.
Sounds like you might be better off, to be honest.
That is true.
Yikes.
Yikes.
No, that is true. A bunch of harassment allegations out of Ubisoft. They fired a bunch of people. That happened in the last week, and then didn't mention it in Ubisoft Forward, but did tweet out that it was all filmed, several weeks beforehand, and I didn't know how to handle that. But hopefully,
it takes more than a couple of weeks to film a 2-minute video. Like we all know that's very long and
fair. But hopefully that is a step towards getting a healthier
Shots
company
fired.
culture there.
Damn, Mike Biffle.
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong.
I'm not getting Far Cry 60 sent to me anymore, am I? No.
No, I feel like Assassin's Creed, like those games, are obviously a labor of love, and hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people work on an Assassin's Creed title.
Wasn't that the whole thing?
Tremendous
The
project,
first
but-
one is like 1,000 people. What I loved is what they said, it was like 1,000 people from all faiths or something. It said
Yes.
made this game. It was like that was the opening thing. I was like, what a cool
think
way
they-
to start
I think
off.
they still open the games with that
Yeah, they do.
disclaimer. Like,
Do
This
they?
is a very interfaith, like, I can't remember the different sort of.
Multicultural or whatever it says.
Yeah,
diverse.
exactly.
I think every game they have starts that way. Interesting.
They haven't remastered one, have they? The first one?
No, they just did the Ezio collection.
What's the? They just did the Ezio collection.
Is 2 Brotherhood Revelations.
I think they've remastered everything except one, I believe.
Why?
We've
Man,
spoken about this
good.
before, Troy. It's like I was so passionate about Assassin's Creed in those original few games because I was so into that story, and I feel like if we had have gotten what that team originally had written, that it might have been one of like the best video game sci-fi trilogies ever written. But then they annualized it, so it all changed. The reason to not remaster Assassin's Creed 1 is totally the gameplay loop, because I was just not playing it myself, but watching a friend play it on Discord. We just kind of like give him games to play, and I'll watch them, and we'll just like hang out at night and watch them. I made him play Condemned recently, and Alone in the Dark, and like all this old stuff that I was just like, yeah, yeah, Condemned. Still full of jump scares.
How's Alone in the Dark age? Do you mean like that gritty
Yes.
reboot of Alone in the Dark? Has that aged terribly?
It basically doesn't function.
Wait, Alone in the Dark. That
remember
was a
that being the
PC
case
game,
at the
wasn't it? That was one of the old like.
It was on console too. The one I'm referring to, that is, it was on.
What am I
It was
thinking
like
of?
a gritty reboot where he had a leather jacket, which came out like
Yeah, that was like
Yeah.
2015, I think.
mid 2000s.
Yeah,
or
a
something.
bit older than that.
Oh, that
Yeah.
long ago.
But yeah, we were playing through virtually all of the Assassin's Creeds, just bits and pieces, and the Assassin's Creed 1 gameplay loop, I think, for a lot of people, is just, it's a lot of the same 4 things over and over and over again. And while I love Altair, and I even like the Desmond stuff in that game, and I'm super into the lore, I feel like, especially going from playing a more recent Assassin's Creed game like Odyssey or Origins to jumping back to that first game, you're like, oh my god, I can't do anything. Flip side of that, though, is one thing that I loved about the early Assassin's Creed games was that you can approach an objective however you want to, whereas now, I think it maybe started with Revelations, I'm not sure exactly when. Now they give you objectives for everything that you do. It's like, do this in this order, kill this many people, do this. So while you have more freedom in the way that you literally approach the world, and it's not the same mission structures over and over again, you kind of have less freedom in some ways because they give you so much guidance for different objectives now too. So
I feel like that's probably, if I had to guess, I would imagine that's partially out of necessity for just how much bigger the games have gotten. They're so
Yeah.
sprawling. Like Odyssey was the first one that I played where I was almost intimidated by its size. Like you get on your boat and then you look at an objective and you're like, I have to set sail for the next week to reach that other island.
Yeah.
It got huge.
I mean, even
and it's
Unity
cool, but it's
was at the point
yeah.
where you look at the map and it's just cluttered with like icons that you're just like, how am I gonna do any of this? There's just so much stuff.
That's
You know
why
You
I
know the
feel like
coolest Unity story? Wait, hold on, Troy. You know the coolest Unity story was that you guys probably all know this, but they modeled the interior structure of the Notre Dame so meticulously that when it was on fire, they actually were able to use their models to help the fire department know where to go.
No way.
To deal with they basically had the world's most accurate 3D model of Notre Dame.
Wow.
Because and the cool thing is, it was, if I remember correctly, it was like one person on the team's baby. Like it
Oh
was
my
like this person who had
gosh.
just spent all this time on it, and so they basically contacted the Paris fire department and said, we might be able to help you because we know the nooks and crannies of this thing in a 3D environment
Wow.
almost perfectly.
That's so
basically.
cool.
I just saw a headline kind of cruise by on Twitter, and I read the article and was like, that is just like, for all the hate Unity got, I think it flipped the script in that one move.
One of the things that I liked about that game, but for the record, that game also, having played that again this year, still has a lot of bugs, including like faces not loading and environments not loading. And
Well,
they had trouble with
I
that
think
game.
they shipped that game with like 1,000 known bugs. Which I mean,
I think it was because it was so populated. That game is really populated. Even playing it now, the streets are just full of people, and I feel like that was just very difficult for them to figure out how to approach everything else surrounding how many character models there are in any given space all the time.
I didn't ever get tired of Assassin's. That whole I know we've talked about this before, but that whole notion of like just rinse and repeat. I was like, I didn't get tired of it. It was fun. The gameplay and the
You mean
mechanic
the first
was
one?
of the first one, and it felt tighter. It felt more focused. It felt more. I knew what I was doing, and then whenever I did start getting tired of it, then I would come out of the Animus, and there was this whole other layer that was on top of it. I was like, well, this is just great. It was just, history and science fiction are my two like total nerd subjects, and just so to combine those two, and just the notion of like
And the fact that it was sort of a bluff, that you don't know it's a sci-fi until way into the
way
game.
later,
That was a pretty bold move, I thought. Very cool trick to pull.
and again, making this science work, it was like, I mean,
I think it was because it was so populated. That game is really populated. Even playing it now, the streets are just full of people, and I feel like that was just very difficult for them to figure out how to approach everything else surrounding how many character models there are in any given space all the time.
I didn't ever get tired of Assassin's. That whole I know we've talked about this before, but that whole notion of like just rinse and repeat. I was like, I didn't get tired of it. It was fun. The gameplay and the
You mean
mechanic
the first
was
one?
of the first one, and it felt tighter. It felt more focused. It felt more. I knew what I was doing, and then whenever I did start getting tired of it, then I would come out of the Animus, and there was this whole other layer that was on top of it. I was like, well, this is just great. It was just, history and science fiction are my two like total nerd subjects, and just so to combine those two, and just the notion of like
And the fact that it was sort of a bluff, that you don't know it's a sci-fi until way into the
way
game.
later,
That was a pretty bold move, I thought. Very cool trick to pull.
and again, making this science work, it was like it is possible if you can kind of go down the noetic science route for just a little bit to think that our memories have they can be quantified in some way, and that somehow they are embedded into our, that's how we have instincts, right? So that is essentially a memory. So if that can be tied to your DNA, then essentially if we can map that DNA, then we can essentially go into the consciousness and the memories of somebody else, and essentially we could be time traveling. I was like, I'm in. I get that 100% scans with me. Like from the very, very beginning, I was bought in.
Not
And
to
just
mention that it was also one of the best in the kind of Ken Levine sense. It had one of the best sort of fusions of gameplay and narrative where you didn't die, you desynchronized.
Yeah.
And I always thought
Yes.
that was like, that's right up there for me with Would You Kindly, as like a way to tie it all together and make the game harmonize with sort of the potential ludonarrative
It's the same with you
dissonance issues.
desynchronize if you killed civilians, because it could be like, Ezio didn't do that, or Altair didn't do that.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it could just kick you out of the game rather than giving you a failure or whatever else. It's a really smart way to deal with that. And yeah, I'm with you, Trobit. I got burned on Assassin's Creed because I was so invested in the sci-fi stuff from 1 to... I think I remember being a little bit worried when Brotherhood got announced, but Brotherhood is actually my favorite in the series. And even through to Revelations, and then 3 is where they really get rid of all of the sci-fi stuff that I was so invested in, with like the people who came before and the Pieces of Eden and what it all meant, and the end of Assassin's Creed 2 with Ezio saying who is Desmond when one of those people who came before says Ezio. It's like I was so into that lore that when they scrapped it all, it felt like this investment that I was so attached to just burned to the ground in front of me. And I always am like, just one day I hope I get to... maybe it's Jade Raymond, like just talk to someone and be like, what was the story? How did it actually end? What was this
So
trilogy?
what precipitated what they shifted what they were going to do? Like they were going
It was
to do
supposed to be a
something and then
trilogy.
changed?
Like just Assassin's Creed 1, Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed 3. A literal trilogy of sci-fi games where you were supposed to play like Altair era, Ezio era, and then the theory was that most of the third game would be modern day, mostly
Well,
Desmond.
that's the way that 2 leaves off, is like you end was the strangest thing ever, by the way. The last boss battle is happening over credits. That was weird.
It's the Pope, isn't it? Is that
No.
It's after the Pope.
You're now playing as Desmond. You come out of the Animus, they're attacking, and as the credits are rolling, you're fighting. And so I was like, oh, I get it. So third was going to be, you're no longer playing as Ezio. You're no longer playing as Altair. You're now playing as Desmond Miles.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's going to be interesting. It's like, nope.
I
We're
was
just going to
so
keep doing what
into
we're doing.
it, but then they were like, but these are selling well. What if we could make one every year? And so that's what happened. But I mean, the Assassin's Creed franchise has still done a lot of really, really cool things and has a lot of stuff that I really like in it now. So I'm like, it's not like I'm...
Especially Syndicate, right?
Especially Syndicate, really, really great.
Probably the high mark of the whole franchise.
I played the whole thing on mute, but otherwise, it's great. I played the
'cause
Hotline
there's-
Miami soundtrack instead.
Mike, I have a question for you. Do you think that is the
Expectedly.
goal of whenever you create a game, do you want to hopefully create a franchise IP? Or are you wanting to, do you think about that? Because me personally, I believe that exactly what Alana said was the downfall of Assassin's Creed. In my opinion, by the way, the numbers
like,
and the critics would disagree. Is that we have this huge successful franchise. We don't have to worry about what we're going to do next. This is success for devs.
I want to hear Mike's answer, but just to add one sentence into that, for what it's worth, when we were starting on Syndicate, one of the first questions I asked was, does the score have to have kind of 2 identities for modern day and for the Victorian London? And they made clear that, I think the way the wind was blowing is that they said, we don't think the players actually care that much about the future sci-fi aspect compared to the running around in a period time. Like the first question is always, when does the next one set? What part of the world is it set in? That's the stuff the players seem to care about. So they were just investing more and more in the part that the people seem to like. And so we didn't do any music at all for the present day story. It's 100% score free in Syndicate. And now I'm going to shut up and let Mike answer.
What?
Yep. It's all just dialogue.
That's super interesting.
Yeah. There's no playable present day in Syndicate either. It's all just cutscenes. Anyway, I'm going to shut up because I was actually being rude.
You weren't being rude.
I'm being rude.
I'm being rude. That's the whole show.
That is the show.
Yeah, we
Rude,
were
the
supposed to talk
podcast.
about Ghost of Tsushima, and here we are. We were not going to talk about Ubisoft today, and here we are.
Wow.
I'm pulling away from Ubisoft right away. Let's do
I
it.
understand.
Let's.
Now I want to hear your IP. Your
What's
IP.
the question? Oh, the franchise thing.
Yeah.
Is that the goal?
I don't know if it's the goal. Like, the goal is to continue making games until I die of old age. And anything that gets me there, I'm happy with, right? Like, and I think franchise is interesting because it's an interesting opportunity. It's something I've only ever done once. I've only ever done one sequel, which is Quarantine Circular. We don't tend to do it because I tend to get bored. That's the honest answer. Is I tend to just want to go off and do something completely different.
That's you though.
But we always factor it in. We always factor it in like as a possibility. I think every game we've shipped since Volume, including Volume, we've had the sequel. I know what the sequel to Volume would have been had Volume basically warranted a sequel if it had done well enough that we didn't have a choice.
What about Thomas was agoraphobic, or Thomas doesn't
So Thomas
like
Was
big
Alone
crowds?
is a special.
No,
so,
I like Thomas
so
Was Alone.
genuinely,
Yeah.
I know what the title of the sequel to Thomas Was Alone is. Thomas Was Alone is one that we will is weird because that's the one that obviously it sold really well, and it's one that we probably should financially do a sequel to. But I've been adamant throughout that I don't want to make the sequel to Thomas Was Alone until I'm 50. I want that to be kind of the bookend. I want to jump in with because Thomas Was Alone's a lot about where my brain was and what my views on the world were when I was 25, and I kind of want to go and do it when I've aged and I have different kind of wisdom.
Dude, that's incredible.
That's the plan. We'll see if I get to do it. We'll see, or I'll get hit by a car tomorrow.
Some Towns Van Zandt stuff right there.
But I know one of my friends who sort of
Leonard
newly
Cohen.
jumped into game dev was talking about he started working on an IP that was an existing IP and was like, okay, this is frustrating and difficult because we have all these restrictions based on the IP. And then I remember talking to him the day that he started working on a new IP, and he was like, it's like being in the middle of space and there is literally nothing in sight for you to grab at, and it is one of the most difficult starting processes ever. And he was like, I think today's the first day that I don't know if I want to be in game dev. And it was such an interesting conversation because he was just so overwhelmed by the difference between working on an existing IP and starting a brand new one for a major publisher, that it was just this daunting wall of oh my god, how am I supposed to just make this thing happen? And I feel like there are
it's terrifying.
benefits
The
to
blank
both.
page is a brutal thing to confront.
Yeah.
Well,
I like both though. I like both. I really like working on Wick for that reason, because we had we knew
Rails.
what Wick was, so we just had to lean into that. But I also I like doing original stuff. We're quite cool. I have my little kind of safety net of all of our games take place in a shared universe. So there's lots of little links between the stories and stuff. So
it's very Stephen King of you.
It's honestly, I'm sure no one in the world enjoys it other than me, but it does mean that even though it's a blank page, I know
there are rules.
I know in our world, when did sentient AI happen? Why did that happen? And what's going on in space in our universe? Everything ties together. And and that kind of means at least it's not nothing. At least
Is that
I
even
know...
true with North Star Rising?
Yeah, literally there's your character in North Star Rising has a fear of a group called the Order. And I think I can't remember if we did any lines about it with you, but it's a thing that's in his head. And the Order are the villains from Quarantine, and
That's cool.
things bounce around. Everything ties together with it. Which is really fun, and it's not there because I think there's people on the internet who are obsessed with that, because I don't
Whole
think they
Reddit
are. I
threads
think
decrypting your.
it's just useful, in terms of, although I do actually have to occasionally check fan wikis to remember facts about Thomas Was Alone, which is fun. But genuinely, it's nice to have that. It's I'm sure it's true of most creatives. It's the first mark the painter makes on the canvas is not core to the thing. It's just to put something on the paper so they can keep going from there. I think the same is true of that. It's useful to have these little touchstones I can go back to.
Tying it back to Ghost though, if
Back. We haven't even started.
Yeah, I can't use it in the headline now. I'm gonna have to figure out some Assassin's Creed Call of Duty Transformers bullshit.
Sure, yeah, good luck. No, we
I
talked
think
about
that
it
was
first.
the
We
title.
talked
I just
about
wanted
Call
to
of
say-
Duty, Assassin's Creed, Transformers bullshit. Is that not the name of the episode?
That's a great
Super
title.
quick for the people watching the video version, you would have just seen me move a file. I just got a message from work and they were like, can you please upload this? So you would have just seen that pop up on the screen. I'm sorry about that. I just had to upload something. Continue.
The thing I was going to say is about Ghost is from starting over from scratch, right? Here you have a very successful franchise with Sucker Punch. They had the Infamous franchise, did great. You had this boom. Infamous one came out, and I know that you liked. What was the other one? What was the knockoff version of that you liked better, Alana?
Prototype.
Prototype.
I don't know that I liked it better. I was just
wasn't.
into it because nobody else cared about it.
Yeah, it was
It's very much
definitely
the Hotline Miami of third person.
Truly, yeah.
It's just a little bit better.
that was the year of Armageddon and Deep Impact. It was you're one of two camps. It's Coke or Pepsi.
Prototype 2 was genuinely great though.
They're
Prototype
both
2 was
good.
better.
It's also
Yeah.
it was such an interesting game for Activision to publish. I always think that they were publishing these double A titles like Prototype and Prototype 2, and it was yeah, I mean you had
Prototype wasn't that THQ? Prototype was THQ.
Was it? I
Look
think
it
they
up.
were both
That rings a
Activision.
bell, actually. That rings a bell. Because we were working on... I don't know if this was ever announced, but we were working on something kind of similar. No, it's Activision. You're
It
right.
was Activision. All right.
We were working on the THQ kind of equivalent
You
at
win.
one point, but that kind of died.
Always
Saints
believe
Row
Alana
did it
Pierce.
as well.
Yeah, Saints Row.
I love the way Saints Row
That
did
was
it.
definitely THQ.
Yeah.
The thing that I was going to say is like you have that they reinvented that franchise, right? So they went from 1 to 2, and then they did the DLC, which actually really skyrocketed. It was a great selling. I think it was the first.
And that established the kind of Sony mid-quel kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Now
that.
seeing
That was the, I think the
Spider-Man,
first time that they did the DLC, like the disc separate disc DLC,
I
standalone
love
DLC.
that. I love that they do that.
I love it. That's great.
And then Far Cry did it after that with Far Cry 3.
Blood
so, like,
Dragon, and they did it with New Dawn as well.
Yeah, so they set a precedent, and then all of a sudden they're like, all right, we're gonna flip it, and we're gonna do a completely different person, and that was a bold move, and it performed well, but for them to go, all right, we're tired of this franchise, like, no, you just started a new one, you do a sequel, you do another one, or you do another one within this new universe of Second Son that you created, and they're like, no.
Is that what you were yelling as you were knocking on the front door of the?
You know,
the office?
honestly, man, no.
Really?
The
You weren't-
beauty of it is, I am a firm believer in once you take the character as far down as you go, because the last thing I want to do is do a Crystal Skull, and it's like, you actually make this
overdo it.
retroactively worse.
I so reject that. By the way,
I know, but it's a great analog to pull from, because
I just don't understand the idea of retroactively worse. I get.
How about this? The sequel to Independence Day made me. I can't watch Independence Day anymore because
I saw the sequel to Independence Day come up on iTunes the other day, and I forgotten it existed, despite seeing it like.
God
in the
bless
cinema when
your
it came out.
mind.
I know nothing about it.
It
I
is-
can't hold it in my head.
it is
as a thing.
so awful. It is.
It is an impressive achievement of terrible filmmaking.
I kind of want to watch
Because
it
it's
again,
the
though.
thing that's so astonishing about it is that it's like member berries to the extreme.
Yes.
It is so obsessed with reminding you of the first Independence Day, where everything they're doing is, hey, check out this thing that we did before, but now it's bigger. That's
And
basically
Judd
the whole
Hirsch
movie.
is a pedophile. It's like the worst. At the
it's-
very end, he looks at little girls and goes, "I think you should come live with me." I was in
don't
the
even
theater. I
remember
went, "What?" I was like, "Come to my basement.
We don't like any
Get
of
in
that.
my windowless van." Huh?
Not good. It's not good.
No, it's terrible. I was like, "What are you doing?" It was horrible.
I don't even remember that. I just remember being
Horrible.
astonished at like they even make Bill Pullman like try to give a speech, and I was like everything about it. But that's the thing. If I go back and watch Independence Day, I go, now there's the good stuff. There's a film made with genuine heart and intention and actual thumb on the pulse of what's fun and what's entertaining.
I know
Like,
we
it
sometimes
doesn't-
touch on these conversations of like how movies and games differ, and I feel like that is the most dramatic way in which the two mediums differ, is that playing new games absolutely does retroactively make an old game worse. It is difficult to go back to an old game in the same franchise if the mechanics are bad in a lot of cases.
You just
Oh.
experienced this.
Well, but that's different though, right? What you're saying is if the
you.
sequel is better, it hurts the original. Right? Is that what you're saying, Alana?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What-
that's
what-
the
what game
opposite.
did you just-
That's
was
the
it-
opposite problem, though. Like,
Was it Deadly
'cause-
Premonition 2? What did you just play that you were like, "What is happening right now?" Like you love this game and then
Yeah, I have been playing Deadly Premonition 2. However, like that's such an interesting game to talk about. So Deadly Premonition is my favorite game. And I think that I have, upon playing 2, realized Deadly Premonition, I always say it's my favorite game, but it's bad. Deadly Premonition is actually not bad. It has a level of jank that I think fits the tone and the aesthetic of that game. But the thing is, despite it being completely bizarre and frankly just batshit insane and every character being just not at all a real human, it's well written. And I think I never gave it credit for being well written because that's why I care about it. Like the murder mystery of Deadly Premonition with all these bizarre people where any of these people who are insane could be a murderer is, I mean, it's Twin Peaks, but it's super appealing. Deadly Premonition 2 is worse than Deadly Premonition 1 in terms of the frame rate. It somehow looks worse. That's even going outside of like there's a bunch of like weird transphobic stuff that seems really unnecessary that supposedly
about
Soiree
that.
is patching. It's really odd. I'm only just into the start of that, and my favorite character in the game basically says something along the lines of like, oh, this character, oh well, you should know they're not a real woman. And it sucks because that was my favorite character, and he's this like loving sweetheart who's just very enthusiastic about everyone, and then they make him make a comment like that where it's just like, why on earth did you do that? It doesn't, which is why I don't understand where it comes from, because The Missing is conversely another sweary game that is like quite good at.
I was going to say Sweary's been great on that stuff in the
Yeah,
past.
I
Like,
think
it's
that he
weird. Yeah.
like I keep
Who's
trying
the
to be
dev?
like, well, it's published by Rising Star Games. I guess I only like I don't know who the dev studio would be unless it is Swery just the studio. I mean, I actually don't know who the developer would be. I would always just say it's a story game. Let me look it up to see if it's not just like a Bithell Games style.
It's actually a Bithell
situation.
Games game.
Hey.
Look, it was one guy, and then he accidentally hired a lot of other people.
I
and now
can't
he's
do all of
stuck, and
this.
It'd be nice.
Oh shit, I'm not
Oh,
Orson
no.
Welles. Oh no.
Oh no.
Well, I
Access
still
games maybe.
I think Alana's point about successive games make you reevaluate the original one. Like for me, Mass Effect is the good example of that, where the quantum leap forward from Mass Effect 2 and 3 definitely make replaying 1 a little bit of a labor of love, because it's just they learned so much and they evolved the game so much. But
Deadly Premonition
that-
2 does go backwards. That was like a very good call from Troy to make that. It does go backwards, but in a way that I actually don't think it hurts either game.
Dead Space 2, I didn't enjoy as much as Dead Space 1, but it didn't make me. It actually made me love Dead Space 1 more. Godfather 3 doesn't make me not love Godfather 2 or 1 any less.
exactly. So when would that distinction happen? Like, why is
Independence Day 2.
suddenly-
I was very clear about that.
Yeah, but why? What gives Roland Emmerich in 2017 or whatever power over 1994 Roland Emmerich?
I don't think it's Roland Emmerich. I think that it's Dean Devlin. Dean
Well, okay,
Devlin was
fine.
the one. But no, that's a clear distinction. There's
It's
a
a
difference between
relationship.
Yeah,
It's a what?
it's for sure
With
subjective.
entertainment, it's a relationship.
Yeah.
It's a
I
bad
feel like
breakup.
my question's
A bad
being
breakup's
lost.
going to make you reframe the relationship.
Yeah, and the next
Absolutely.
relationship.
Well, I guess,
Sure.
but to me, it's like, let's say, I'm trying to think of a good comparison to make. Like, I mean,
Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull.
Yes,
Well,
great.
yeah. See, for
Perfect, let's
me,
go.
Last Crusade in particular is one of the best films ever made. To me, that's just absolutely the pinnacle. It's one of Spielberg's absolute finest. It's, for me, the best Indiana Jones. Crystal Skull does not have that title. So, but there's nothing about Crystal Skull that makes me go rewatch Last Crusade and say, I just can't feel it anymore, because like I know that 20 years later Spielberg is going to make some bad choices. Like,
No. I don't think that extends to that. I'm saying there's things that they did in Independence Day 2 that make me go, I just can't go back and watch Independence Day now, because it makes me think of what they did in 2.
I get that. Having not seen Independence Day 2, do they like retcon things or change things in Independence Day 1?
yeah, they definitely, the fundamental premise of the alien invasion in the first one is that this is the entire civilization of these aliens, and that like they go planet to planet, they use it up, and they move on. And then they're like, no, actually it turns out it's like a giant galactic empire, and they're sending the real bad guys now because
Yeah.
we pissed them off. And I'm like, well, that's actually a violation of your kind of foundational idea.
Yeah, and I think that can cause issues for sure. If
They're
a
back
sequel,
and they're pissed off. It was just like stupid.
And the fact that the alien mothership is like solidly a third the size of Earth, I was like, we'd be getting into some physics where that would basically ruin the entirety of Earth just on its approach. Like, sorry to bust out the physics nerd shit.
it's
but,
like you're gonna get Neil deGrasse Tyson on it. You're like, well, actually,
Exactly.
gravity.
Yeah, like I was like, they're so obsessed with their visual effect shot, they don't think about sort of what they're doing here.
Won't
It's
somebody
just-
think of the science?
I mean,
And
Come
that's
on.
the problem is they just started betraying characters. And it was like, you did such a great job before, just like giving us characters like, I know who you are, I know who you are, I know who you are. And that's the thing that I don't like. And trust me, we can talk about this with Last of Us because people
That's what
thought
I
the
was gonna
same thing
say,
of that
Troy.
as
Is like
well.
that's one of the criticisms that I like very fundamentally disagree with is, and I think I've said this on this show before, is that it betrays Joel, and like I so strongly disagree with that criticism. But that is
Yeah.
an issue that people are having with The Last of Us Part 2 for sure. Is the idea that it's like, well, my Joel and Ellie wouldn't do this.
And that's the thing. It's not a betrayal of the character, of the canonical character. It is a potential betrayal of the character you wanted them to be, which is an interesting argument because that's what The Last of Us Part 1 posits is Joel X or Y? And emergently, people ask them, the game never posits that. However, the aftermath of the game, people ask that question and went, did he do the right thing?
You know,
Is he a hero? Is he a villain? And the beauty of part 2 is it goes, it doesn't fucking matter, whatever your decision is.
it's a really interesting thing to bring up because like when I finished Part 1, I love that ending. I still think it's like one of the best video games endings forever. But I feel like I was like, you know, weighing up what I would do in that situation, but I didn't weigh up what it would do in the world. I was like, oh man, the choice he had to make with his character, who I also really love, like that's really deep. And then you get into the second game and I start thinking about every other person in the world who has maybe heard his name and heard about what he did, who fucking hates him. And it's like, that's a layer that I actually didn't think about at all when I was like weighing up what I would have done in that. I don't think about the extra layer of the character whose dad got killed and then all of their hope is just completely lost. And it is a really interesting take on that because, like you said, it's not necessarily a betrayal of that character. It's a betrayal of your relationship to that character and what you project on them as well. Which I feel like is it.
But what's interesting, right, is game protagonists are co-authored, and that's something not to dismiss. Like I do have a right as a player to an opinion about who the character I'm playing as is because I've projected myself onto them, right? Like I did find that I've not finished Last of Us 2, but like yeah, Ellie is doing stuff that doesn't feel like stuff that I think Ellie should be doing, and that's something that like that disjoint is academically interesting, but it's also just interesting to a player. And I get that that's what the game's going for. That's not an accident. That's intentional. It's about that distinction.
And that's the thing.
But I can see where that comes from and why that would frustrate.
Well, when you talk about gameplay for a video game, say I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima right now, I say I did this. I don't say Jin did this. You still say this is what
and then
I did.
I did this, and I went off and did this side quest.
Yeah.
The thing that to go back to The Last of Us is the only reason why we collectively love Joel is because we got to see this one very narrow window and a story that happened in a vacuum. Everybody else, you would not look at Joel, especially in part 1, and go, he was a very loved person. No, he was a feared person. He was probably a hated person.
He was on both sides.
He was on both sides.
To me, that one line
says everything.
Says we don't know much about this guy, and there's a lot of skeletons in the closet.
His own brother doesn't want to be in relationship with him, and that says a lot. So
that's why, to me, the idea of Joel didn't deserve that has never felt right to me, because I'm like, I begged the game to make me not kill the doctor at the end of the first game. I stood there for so long, and I shot at the floor to try to scare them away and all this stuff. And I was like, the game is making me do this because Joel would undoubtedly do this. And the game is giving me time. It's like suspending reality to give me time to come to terms with needing to ride shotgun with Joel doing this. And so that's why when suddenly it's like, but he's this hero and beloved this and that, and he deserved better. I'm like, he was actually kind of an awful person who I invested in because he loved Ellie and he found a catharsis that he needed. But this was a broken man.
Yes.
Like,
I totally
and not a
think he
good
deserved
man.
it. Yeah.
But this is like, Mike will probably love saying this. Joel is, and probably unintentionally, because I know how Neil feels about Blake Snyder, but he is 100% a shining example of Save the Cat. All of the things that he did, as long as you can point back to the fact, yeah, but the way he treated that girl. So if there's any betrayal of the character, it's not that Joel was not, or Joel seemed to be too trusting. It's the fact that he is now this beloved center of community, and that the thing that we love Joel so much. It was like, well, then that's the betrayal of the character, because you shouldn't. This man has done horrible things.
Yeah.
So
I remember, Austin, when you pointed out the thing about the flowers in front of the house, that
Oh,
I
totally.
hadn't thought about that moment, and thinking about it and being like, yeah, he turned his life around quite quickly, that this community cares that he's gone. Whereas in The Last of Us Part 1, almost nobody cares when he's gone. Everyone's just like, fuck off, dude. Like, it doesn't matter at all. And that is a really strong point. And to end this before I have to run to my next thing, I was going to ask Troy, while we're on the topic, is that is one criticism that I've seen. How do you feel about people saying, why would he have given this person his name? I don't think he would do that as a character. What is your take on that?
We talked about this in a podcast we did with Greg Miller, and that scene, Neil and I discussed, I mean, exhaustively. We wrestled like Jacob and the angel over that scene, because both of us knew the importance of it, and we knew that it had to happen, but we had to both arrive there honestly, and Neil got there faster than I did. And with of course the help of Hallie Gross. So for me, Joel is finally saying, I am deserving of love. I am deserving of, I am putting away the childish things. I now have a new purpose. When we saw Joel in the very beginning of part 1, he wasn't this grizzled, untrusting, ruthless survivor. He was a dad. And he is finally almost 25 years later, as he's entering the third act of his life, finally going, you know what? I don't have to be a smuggler anymore. Tommy and Tommy's town and Jackson, what that represents is it represents family. It represents safety. It represents I can put down my roots. It means I can finally be a person again. And he is going to spend every day of his life sacrificing bits of himself in order to somehow heal the relationship with Ellie. Because the second that they ride into Jackson at the end of part 1, every step is a step towards redemption for Joel. The redemption didn't happen in the waiting, or his sin, his transgression happened with the fireflies and then the subsequent lie after it. So when he finally gets to, and he's lived there now for 2 years, and he's allowed himself to get comfortable, and he's allowed himself to care. He's put on a little weight. He's gotten comfortable. He still goes out and he does his duty, and he's now putting off his diligence and his almost stoicism to Jesse and to other characters to go, make sure that you do this. He's trying to teach Ellie how to be, when she goes on a patrol, that she's careful, and he's just trying to do what he can, because he's realizing he's not that guy anymore. And so when we first get into town, and Tommy and I are, we ride back, there's like, okay, yeah, we can't be here. We've got to get there. I'm a little unwary, but this is just a person. This is not the threat. There wouldn't be a threat. I know threats. This doesn't look like a threat. And that was my mistake. This is what happens when you drop your guard. This is what happens when you care. This is when it happens when you love. And it's just that reminder. And there's even that moment he just shakes his head. And he's like, whatever speech you got, let's just get this over with, because I fucked up. But at the same time, he looks and he's like, I do it all over again. And that is the change in the man. So everyone's like, he would never drop his guard. He's like, you're goddamn right he wouldn't. And he didn't, really. But the fact that he goes, fuck, I did it, man. I got comfortable in this, and it caught up with me. And I think even in that moment, Joel realizes, like, not in this world, it doesn't matter. Because the same thing would have happened. I would have lost the girl, and I still would have gotten killed, but it would have been by somebody else. It doesn't matter if I deserved it or not. Heroes or villains, we all meet our end, and this is mine. And I will meet it with my head up. And that's fucking Joel.
All right. I feel like I should clap. I'm like, that was just hell of a... Good job. Good.
There's a bigger,
answer.
I mean, that is an excellent
You could have
answer.
just said, yeah, it was fine.
That's actually, honestly,
Yeah, he changed. That's what I've been saying when people come up with that with
Yeah,
me.
he
I'm like, well, he got softer.
But that's-
That was poetic and amazing.
So the interesting thing there
Troy
is
Baker, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry.
Troy's demonstrating the part of his job that no one ever kind of really hears, or they hear the result of that work in the performance. But ultimately, those are the kind of decisions and thought processes that actors don't get credit for.
True.
Also, there is a real problem in terms of how we criticize media, that this obsession with kind of this character did something dumb. Yes, characters do dumb things.
Yes.
That's
Humans do
like,
dumb things.
and it's
I think I've spoken
Humans
about this
do dumb
before,
things,
is
and
we
it's-
don't question it when humans do stupid shit in real life, but in fiction we're like, that doesn't make any sense. Humans make mistakes in real
there's
life
a
all
difference
the time.
there's a difference between a plot hole and a character doing something that is in their character to make that mistake. Joel's defining mistake in the first game is he lets his guard down by caring too much. And as Troy's pointed out, that's a thread you can absolutely kind of push through to that scene in 2. But that's, I as someone who like this kind of cinema sins kind of thing of just going, well, that's something that wouldn't happen. It's like, A, it's a story and we have to get where we're going.
Yeah.
And B, characters do dumb, stupid stuff. That's, as long as it's within their character to be stupid in that way. It wouldn't make sense if it had been established, if John Wick made that mistake, you would, as an audience, go, no, John Wick doesn't make mistakes. John Wick is...
And there's a difference
pro in
between
that way.
a mistake and a miscalculation. If you see a calculation happening, John Wick is still capable of making a miscalculation.
Correct. Oh yeah, no, exactly right. But my point is, it's within their nature. Like you can absolutely go, which kind of stupid is this character? Because we're all some kind of stupid, right? We're all going to make a specific kind of mistake. We all have this curse of whatever. We all have an Achilles heel, and yeah, that's Joel's. So it does make sense in that context.
The thing that I will say, Mike, as you continue your journey in this, is that what I realized from playing this game is that, and obviously are also from knowing Neil and everybody that worked at Naughty Dog, there was not a single thing that was done haphazardly or purposelessly, and you could disagree with it, but there's things that I was like, I hate that I'm doing this right now. And they're like, yes, we understand that. And that's part of the experience. The gameplay extends beyond the screen and outside of the controller. And for me, it filled the room. And it's something that I've not experienced.
I completely agree. Hating. There are moments that I don't think you've gotten to yet, Mike, where it capitalized on the surgery room moment of the first one by actively making me do stuff I didn't want to do. And it was like, it's the first time I've ever felt like I just want to put the controller down and not play this. Not because it's bad, but because it's like tearing apart my moral compass, and in a way that's so fascinating and powerful and genuinely affecting.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think anything but a game could do this.
Yeah, and
GTA
there's a
5
character
does
that
that real bad. But
Which one?
you literally have to torture someone. You rip their teeth out. You have to do
Oh.
it. And I remember just not understanding, because in The Last of Us Part 2, I understand why it makes me do the stuff that I don't want to do. Like, there was this one part where I was like, just let me die instead. I'll just keep dying. Roll credits. It's fine. Don't worry about it. While understanding that was the purpose of what was happening. I wasn't meant to want to do it. But I never understood that in GTA 5, the purpose of making me torture someone, where, that's, I think, a mission that Michael is also active in. Why couldn't I have been Michael on the phone? Why did I have to torture this person as Trevor? And I never understood what they were intending to do by making me rip someone's teeth out with different
I do.
tools.
I think it's a bit
What do
more
you think it was?
sensationalism. It's put them on the stick and they'll remember that moment. I feel it's incredibly, it's a device, right? The thing that The Last of Us does is that it reminds you that these characters exist outside of your, like you said, Mike, outside of your authorship, that you are a co-author, but rest assured, this is a partnership, and there is a very strong partner that exists on the other side that has perhaps oppositional beliefs to you.
And
that
is
they're-
ultimately in control. That's also
that is
important to me.
ultimately in
Yeah.
control.
Like, you can't change their fate of their decision making.
A little desynchronize.
You were desynchronized. Ooh, look what you did. All right, you got to go to your
Heyo.
next thing. I
I
know.
do. Thank you, guys. If you guys both got Ghost of Tsushima codes, maybe we'll talk about that next week, because I really
I like
wanted
it.
to talk about. I just love this world so much.
For
The
normal plebeians, it
can also
drops
get it,
what
Austin.
You can get it
tomorrow.
on Thursday, Austin.
All right, fine.
It
I'll
is
play
out.
it.
Or maybe we can
Oh.
find a way to get you a code.
No, wait, it actually is already out. I
No,
realized.
it'll be out by the time it's published. It's out.
Yeah,
Friday.
okay.
We're talking in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because I
It's
would also
Friday,
really like to
Austin.
talk to you
Have you
about it, Austin, in terms of the way that the sound design in the world also funnels you towards certain things. I just feel like this game's so organic about leading you in certain directions.
I'm intrigued to hear the score also. It's an interesting
Oh my God, it's
collaboration
beautiful.
between two composers.
The score is fantastic and I love it. Yeah, Kurosawa mode's the best. Big fan of all of those things. So next week we'll talk about that. We will
Right.
see you guys then. Bye.
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 Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, there was this guy who was on set to basically be a technical advisor. And he just kind of stood off to the side, and this guy was fucking the shit. And they'd have this whole scene after that, you know, blocked out and scripted everything. It was like, all right, guys, you're going into battle right now. And then they had like this whole apocalypse now thing. You're on the helicopter, and you're like, you're yelling, and yeah, there's all this stuff. And they kind of look over at him as like, Mike, whatever the fuck his name was, is like, anything you want to say? He goes, yeah, you could do it like that. They're like, anything you want to make? He goes, nobody'd be saying shit. He's like, no one, if you allow your emotions to become part of the equation, you'll go fucking crazy. And I love that notion of like, this can't be an emotional job, because if you start thinking, oh, I'm gonna get on this helicopter, this huge machine of war and destruction, and these 6 guys that I know, we're gonna ramp each other up, and we're gonna get down into the shit, and statistically speaking, 60% of them are going to die, and in the course of them dying, they are also going to deal out death, and each of them are going to kill at least 5 people. You just can't do that. So it's just like, all right, target down, and he goes, no one's saying shit because you know your job.
I remember watching real footage once during the early days, I guess, of the U.S. Invasion of Afghanistan, where it was from those planes that shoot these short
C-130.
little missiles. Yeah, they're taking out people that are a mile away, and I remember the complete emotionless like dispassion in their voice, where they were like, "We have a target on the hill, firing in 3. Okay, we got him. Next target." And it was just like, it was like listening to someone sort through the inventory of like a hardware store. It was just so. And I remember it was very chilling. But I remember thinking, how could you do that job and not? 10 minutes in, you'd cease to function if you didn't have that as a kind of like an emotional barrier, I would think.
Counterpoint though, did you guys see those Navy videos that went up this week?
UFO, baby.
Yeah, the UFO videos. It's just the people in the Navy being like, bro, what is that, dude?
It's like, hey, man.
Well, that's different than killing. I feel like
It's true.
That's might
They're
be the
identifying
operative.
something not being on a battlefield.
Well, I mean, by definition, you're not identifying something.
Very true. Attempting to. There you go.
Yeah.
Nice one. That
Thank
was
you.
good actually there, Mike Biffle. Actually, by definition, you're
Actually,
not
by
identifying it as it is unidentified. All right. I guess that's our
Is that our cold open?
Yeah, is everybody recording?
I am.
Yeah, I'm
Was I
recording.
recording? I have no idea.
Hey, Austin, to piggyback onto that specific video that you're talking about was reference for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. So they brought us in. They were like, all right, so we're doing this because I think the first one that I was on, the first one that I auditioned for was World at War, which was not projected to do very well, and its sales weren't good until they did the zombies and the whole Army of Darkness thing, and that's what included that forever into that franchise, and really made that
They were right.
yeah, that specific one, I was like, this is stupid and campy. Because I remember because I played Medal of Honor, and then I played like Big Red One and all that stuff. I was like, fucking Band of Brothers, this is great. And especially one of the first games that I ever did was Brothers in Arms. I was like, I love that kind of tactical first-person shooter thing. So, but then we want to go, the first game that I was ever cast in was Modern Warfare. And they're like, we want to show you this footage because you're going to be one of the pilots. I was one of the pilots in the C-130. And they're playing, I was like, really? They're like, yeah, this is what these guys sounded like. It's like, there he is. Boom, he's down. It's just that. And they were like, we need you to be as flat as possible. And I was like, that's, again, the attention, Infinity Ward especially, and this is not a disparagement on everyone from Sledgehammer or even, why can't I think of their name? They do. Treyarch. It started with Infinity Ward. And this thing was born out of Vincent's mind. And for it to be almost an escalation from Medal of Honor into Call of Duty, and everybody else just kind of like got their chance. They were like almost the guitar techs for fucking Joe Perry, and then they just decided to become the guitarists for their own band, and they're all great, and they're huge studios. But no Call of Duty has ever felt to me like what Infinity Ward did. It's always felt a little derivative of, even though I had a blast with Black Ops and I thought it was great, it just was never as good as Modern Warfare, especially.
Still my favorite, which is relevant to what we're talking about today, but I should intro the show before we get there. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Play, Watch, Listen. I'm Alana Pierce. I am joined by video game composer Austin Wintory. T is next. Video game actor Troy Baker and video game director Mike Bithell, who I think a lot of people missed the PSA, even though I feel like we talk about it. Mike also does code. People are like, you guys need someone who knows how to code. Mike is also that.
I mean, I'm not good at it.
Boom.
I'm not good at it.
How to do it.
I do. I have written a bit of code in my time, yes.
Yes. Off the top of the show today, I just wanted to address that something super shitty happened this week. We are not going to discuss that topic. We're going to stay on topic, but I did just want to say to everyone who makes video games, thank you for your hard work. Thank you for the stories that you create that a lot of us get to experience, that shape a lot of people's lives, do a lot of good things. So thank you for all your hard work. We, couldn't be more thankful, or at least I couldn't. I don't know about the rest of you chumps. But thank you. All right, we're talking about remakes. We're actually doing it this week. I've had this Midgar background, I think, like 3 weeks in a row.
Fine.
It's happening.
You mean like Star Wars? Like Star Wars?
Yeah,
I was going to say, but about Star Wars first. I wanted to bring up.
I'm still watching the Clone Wars, and it's still very good, but we're not talking about it. Has anyone other than Mike or I been playing Final Fantasy?
I still haven't.
I still haven't.
Yeah.
And I've not gotten super far in it either, to be honest.
Still in the opening train.
I'm where have I got to? I'm sure if you're like a Final Fantasy VII nerd, you're screaming at the screen, and I respect you, and I would be the same about other games, but like I'm at the town where you get the place. You live next door to a guy. There's a landlady with a massive ball of hair on the back of her head. Yeah, played by apparently the villain from Power Rangers. That was my fact. I found out on Twitter. You know the with the
Wait a minute.
spiky hair. What was her name? I can't remember.
Well, I know the landlady that you're speaking about. I don't know about
so she's
Power
played
Rangers
by the main big bad in the original Power Rangers. I'm forgetting the name of. This is the worst anecdote in the history.
I know what you're talking about. That lady's
Not
very
the worst.
There's a person that she's an actress who played another person.
She does
another
a thing
some time ago.
Those voice actors, they be working on multiple things, I tell you.
They do
Every time.
Mike, how is it that you fully missed out on Final Fantasy?
Yeah,
that surprised me that you.
So yeah, well, I was a PC gamer as a kid. Like I didn't have a console.
Me too. I played Final Fantasy VII on PC.
Did you? You see the only kind of
exactly. Where's your excuse?
Yeah, right. I guess the only kind of Japanese game even that I remember playing as a kid was Metal Gear Solid. Like that was it. And my God, is Metal Gear Solid mind blowing if you are a kid who has no knowledge of anime. No knowledge of like Japanese culture at all. Like you play Metal Gear Solid, it just blew my mind. But no, I never really got into the Final Fantasy games. I remember I think trying 10 at one point, but like that's the one where it's a big sphere of water, right? the sport they play in that. But yeah, I never really JRPGs in general just never got into them. I played a lot of like BioWare and Bethesda stuff, but just never got into the Japanese side of things, which I know is immediately a whole massive swathe of awesome games I've missed out on. So for me it was exciting because it seemed like different. It seemed like I could get the story, but via from what I know is like a more action focused version of the game, which is interesting.
How old were you when you started playing games, Mike?
So I was playing PC like old Apogee style, like Commander Keen and kind of stuff like that when I was like, I guess like 8, 9, 10. And then but then in terms of actually like being like a gamer who was into games, like not until I was like in my like mid to late teens. Like I'm one of those rare game designers who didn't kind of grow up obsessed with games, mainly because I think my parents just didn't want me playing games very much. I remember my mum like being like, we don't want you to waste your life playing computer games, and obviously I bring that up every Christmas. So I think
What now, Mom?
yeah, I've proven it to you. But yeah, it was I was like Dreamcast is where I got into console games in particular. Like that was my my era. So I basically have the tastes of someone about 10 years younger than me in terms of games, in terms of nostalgia and stuff.
I feel like Final Fantasy VII is such an interesting one because I would have been, I don't know, maybe 3 when it came out. 5, 4. I was 4. I just did the math. Bad at it. It takes me a while. But that one was the first Final Fantasy to get extremely popular, though I feel like, I want to say like maybe general industry consensus is that 6 is the best. A lot of people obviously miss that.
Not the consensus for Troy.
Wait, what?
It's also not community consensus. It's general industry consensus, which is a whole other thing. It's definitely a huge thing in IGN when we'd make those, Final Fantasy rank lists. That one was very, very heated. Someone who couldn't make the meeting sent an angry email being like, I just think it's like really fucked up that you guys didn't consider this. Like, it gets so intense. My favorite is 9 because it has this, probably because I was the right age to play it, but it's just got this like very whimsical fantasy feel to it. It's very pretty and the characters are actually really happy, whereas like I feel like Cloud, especially early in Final Fantasy VII, is just a dickhead. He's just rude. And it's so weird to have such an iconic character and everyone acknowledges him as being so iconic, and he's just this kind of grumpy, selfish piece of shit who's just trying to make money. Like, he really is just a muck.
I assume he goes through an arc, though, right?
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Well, because a lot of bad shit happens to him.
Right, okay.
He actually has a really interesting arc, and I'd be interested to see if you finish this game, Mike, what happens, or what you think of what happens in this game, because if you haven't played the original, they kind of change Cloud's
I've heard that there's some, like, it's a different ending, right? Or it's only part of the original game, and that it has, like, some weird choices. I keep seeing these vague allusions to, like, weird choices in the ending. Is that what you mean? Like, it's kind of, or is it just throughout?
I think it's very different.
Positively?
Sorry?
Like,
positively?
Is it a good change? Like, is it a one of those where you feel like they've improved it?
Look, I really respect what they did, and I feel like the audience is split very 50-50 on this, and the reason that I expect it is because they kind of just threw the word remake on its head. It almost feels like a sequel.
But am I not mistaken that they did something? This game went through multiple iterations, and then because I remember being we were at GameStop's big conference, right? And they were like, they just trashed everything they did, and they're completely redoing it, and they kind of threw everything away, and now I was like, well, I remember when because they showed this first at E3, right? It was the Sony press conference?
Yeah, the same one as
that
The
right?
Last Guardian, I think.
I was in the audience for it. I remember being there.
Yeah. And it was holy, because I remember the first time they showed Cloud, I was like, holy shit. I think they showed the gun sword, actually, was the first thing that was, or the big sword. I was like,
People
holy
lost
shit.
their minds,
Yeah.
And I was like, are they going to do this? And then I was like, yes, no, wait, what if we?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, they.
What do you know about the
definitely-
timeline of?
They rehired a bunch of people to redo a bunch of systems that I don't think was actually story related. I think.
From the first, like for the first iteration, or what? Rehired from where?
it was maybe halfway through, and I know one of their main job listings was for someone who could work on the battle mechanics. So I think it was probably mostly gameplay related. An interesting thing about, I was very confused about this game, and if a lot of people were, and they were saying it was going to be episodic, and I was like, how does this game work episodic? That doesn't make any sense. You're going to charge me the same amount for several episodes of Final Fantasy, which can take 100 hours to finish, maybe. It's actually not episodic. They've just split the game into, I would guess, 3 parts, and it is 3 full games, is the impression that I get. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake, as it stands, is a very complete game. I don't imagine they changed the story very much. I would think that the vision, the two who worked on it especially, would have had it's very Kingdom Hearts, really. They would have probably had a through line from the very beginning. But I really like what they did because, like I said, it's not a true remake. They flipped that idea on its head and made it a sequel remake in that it's the same characters going through the same thing, but depending on how you look at it and without getting into anything too intensively, like a different timeline. I just think it's very creative. Like it's very creative.
It's weird.
How is that not just a remake then? If it's the same characters?
No, I know what
events,
she's
but, like,
referring
an
to.
alternate-
Like, I don't know the original, but there's definitely like a feeling of like walking into a party where everyone's already been talking for a couple of hours. Like you have this vibe as you're playing it of like, there's little in jokes and stuff, and there's like, and
You
I'm
need
like,
a previously
that's
on.
well, but it's not. It's more subtle than that. Just the turns of phrase that are used. There's a moment where he walks into a room and a bad guy yells something at him, and he says, "That's my line," and the camera holds for a second as if that's a moment. And it was like, is that something where that was his line in the original, and they've taken that line and
But
given
that,
it to
again,
an enemy?
doesn't that still land it squarely on this is a remake, but it's just self-aware of its predecessor? Like,
think
because that I remember, like James Bond until Quantum of Solace, no Bond film was ever a direct sequel. But the first
Right.
the first non-Connery on Her Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby, the opening scene is him trying to
I
rescue
love
a girl.
him
and
so
she's-
much.
What?
I love you so much right now.
I like that
love
he's
you so much.
non-Connery as a word.
The non-Connery. Yeah, well, that's all
Non-
actors other than Sean
canonically?
Troy is an exemplary
Non-canonically?
non-Connery. And the George Lazenby, he gets slapped by the girl. He tries to rescue her in the opening scene from drowning on the beach, and she slaps him, and he looks straight at the camera and goes, "Well, that never happened to the other guy." And then they roll the main titles, which is full of shots of Sean Connery. And they had avoided showing his face up until that. Like, he's driving his Bond car, and it's like a close-up on his hand, a close-up on lighting the cigarette and all that. And it's like they were just screaming, we know it's not the same. We know it's not the same, but just bear with us, bear with us. And I feel like it's like an in-joke to reboot. It's not continuing. It's like trying to palate cleanse. It feels like what you're describing feels kind of similar.
I'd agree. Yeah, it's not I don't want to call it a remake because it challenges the idea of a remake, and that's maybe me reading into it too far. You could argue against that cohesively just fine, but I feel like it now that I've finished it, seeing the phrase remake on that box art to me is like, it's like it means something different for what they did for this game, which a lot of people are really upset that they changed
like a
so much
fresh
stuff.
take is almost.
Well, I keep seeing it as my head has changed the word to be capital R, capital E, make, because that's what they do with Kingdom Hearts, and it feels very Kingdom Hearts.
They made
It's
it
just
again
like
rather than
remake.
remaking it. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. They made the thing, but they altered it. It's like if someone edited the original script, and those are still 2 very different versions of the same basis.
Sounds almost like a reboot rather than a remake. Almost.
It for sure is more of a reboot than a remake, but that is still kind of a theory because we won't actually know until the second one comes out.
So, do you think it would be more accurate? What is I guess the better question to ask is, what is the benefit then of including 7 as opposed to, now I understand why, like, take 13, right? They did 13.1, 13.2, 13.3. It was a continuation of this IP, this franchise, looking at 13 as an individual thing versus going 13, 14, 15. At what point do you not just call this Final Fantasy 16 that just happens to have these characters and just happens to have these world?
At the
this
point where
world?
you want to make about half as much money.
Is
Yeah,
that what? Do you think that's what it is?
Well, so I mean, we could get into the whole lot, like discussion of like remakes as risk management is definitely like, I mean, the money thing's a very blunt kind of bad way of putting it, but it's risk management. It's with any remake, it's a risk based decision.
But then you also immediately beg the comparison, so that could drive your Metacritic down, which drives your sales down. Which, you know, there's all that. Are you not just like potentially trading risk?
I think Final Fantasy VII, being one of the most iconic games of all time,
Yeah.
was always going to get a lot of hype when it was called the Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I understand that. But it is also, I even feel like that's creative. I feel like there's this meta to the name that, again, I could be reading into that isn't there, but I really feel like it's a very much, I don't know, it feels like endgamey to me in some ways. Like, it feels very...
Like it's the true Final Fantasy.
Sort of. If maybe there is a Final Fantasy. I think that was actually supposed to be 6. It was going to be the last game.
Well, it was meant, the first one was
Really?
meant to be the
I was
final
gonna say,
Fantasy.
You're right. The first one was.
Yeah, that's the whole story, isn't it? Like every
whole
one of
studio
them
was gonna
sort
shut
of
down.
Anticipated. Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, until 7. And then it was like, we're good. This is going to be just fine. Up to 15, we're doing great. But yeah, I feel like the naming choice, like in terms of remakes, does make perfect sense to me. Like for business reasons, like you said, remaking and remastering things, people are going to buy IP. They know this is obviously a huge thing in the film industry as well. The one question I've always had about that is why EA doesn't do it. They won't remake Mass Effect. They won't remaster Mass Effect. They're against it. And my brain's always like, you have this franchise that people absolutely adore. You're EA. Why?
I have a theory. It could be wrong. And I might disagree with it as I go on, so apologies if I do.
Excellent.
So
I can't wait.
So the business case is deeper than just like name recognition. The business case is it's risk, not just in terms of like sales, but in terms of development. So the great thing about doing a remake or a remaster is you know the game you're making when you start. And that never happens. When you're making a game, like there's so much creative risk in terms of, are we going to make a good game or are we going to make a terrible game? Is it going to sell? Is it not going to sell? Is the audience going to care? Are they not going to care? But also just staff things like, can this dev team make this game? You know, and it's really interesting when you're in the process of like pitching projects around like, yes, you're trying to convince people you have a cool idea, but you're also trying to convince them that you like can make sure that the salaries are paid on time so the thing actually gets done.
Don't know what team would make that game.
That's part of it, and I think that's part of it. I think with the other thing though is with all risk management, it's also about the payoff. So what I would bet with someone like EA is such a mega publisher and they're making so much money from their sports games. They probably have run the numbers and gone, we could make a Mass Effect remake. We know how much it would cost because we know literally like how many meshes for characters we need because we could just rebuild everything as it was in the game. Not the Final Fantasy clever kind of remake, just a straight up remake like they did with Spyro, where you just swap all the assets essentially and then rebuild all of the core gameplay code and everything. That's a very quantifiable thing. They can go, okay, Mass Effect will cost exactly this amount. It will take this amount of time. They also can make some guesses about how it would sell based on, you know, all the Mass Effect games, but also on like Dragon Age and all their history with RPGs. I bet they've run the numbers and gone, we could pay 200 people to make this and we would make X, but we could pay those same 200 people to make something new, and either we make no money or we make so much more money than we would from Mass Effect remake. I think this is something people often don't realize, that when you're a publisher and you're managing a whole staple of different games, you're trying to get the hit. Nobody wants from a publisher side, publishers don't want like the safe game that sort of makes a decent return on its investment.
Yeah.
They want Minecraft, they want
EA also has a push for games as service.
Exactly, because
Very
that's where the money
distinctly.
is.
Yeah.
If you're making games as service, yes, a lot of games as service are going to fail. Some, you know, there's obviously things like Anthem, which had not a great launch. But if Anthem had worked, it would have made billions over its lifetime. Like, so it's that kind of, I imagine that's the game they're playing, where they're going, we could make Mass Effect, we'd make money, but probably less money than we could theoretically make if we take a bigger risk with the same team members. So it's
like
a safer bet, but it's not financially for them. They'd rather make the big bets and
Yeah,
try for the next big
especially
thing.
I think EA has almost screwed themselves because Ultimate Team is the most profitable thing ever. They make so much money from Ultimate Team. And I mean, when you look in the inner workings of Ultimate Team, you know, they have a system that They don't have to pay for marketing because they market to everyone who plays the game. You have basically cards that you don't have to pay for printing. Like, it's just this constantly, infinitely renewable resource that doesn't cost that much to run even. And they make so much money from it every single year that it's just, I feel like if you have execs looking at Ultimate Team and being like, why can't we make that on every single one of these games? Why is that not working in this? And the way that Ultimate Team even came about is really fascinating. And the fact that the games community accepted that is this very long history of like perfect things happening, where I think it originally didn't actually launch with the game. It was DLC, and then it was eventually packaged in, and then it just slowly became this addition to FIFA annually that never came across as very aggressive microtransaction heavy because of the way that they paced that out, which was completely unintentional. But I feel like, yeah, EA specifically is sort of screwed when it comes to return, because you have a company that is run by business execs and not game developers, which is always a huge indication of how they're going to make games and what games they're going to make, especially if you look at the board of any company. Plus, they're publicly traded, so that means they care about the stock market, so they care about making a lot of money. And if you, even to your stakeholders, you show them, well, yeah, we have this thing that makes billions of dollars a year, they're like, why can't you make that across the board? Figure out how to do that across the board. They don't care about the game.
Just do more of that.
More of
But
this.
even at
Figure
the,
out
on,
Ultimate Team.
on the even like the artistic argument, right? Let's forget the business, like the really hierarchically very very business focused guys. The guys below that, the guys who actually like really care about games and want to make cool games. Even for them, what's the upside if they make a Mass Effect remake and it does well, like excellently well, like as well as theoretically it could do? Maybe that's enough of a headwind that they can make a Mass Effect sequel, but that's kind of a franchise that's maybe played out. Like, it's a tough thing to do.
That was what I
Whereas
was
if
gonna
they
say.
go
That
and
was
back
the
like
biggest-
a bunch of smaller projects, or in the kind of 5 to 10 million range, which is small for EA. If they back a few of those kind of things, maybe one of those is the next Mass Effect. No one wants the old Mass Effect. The reason to do a remake is usually either to test the water on like an IP, to go, well, should we, something like Spyro, Activision
That's
basically,
what
I
Crysis
assume.
is doing?
Say again, sorry.
I think that's
Crysis.
what Crysis is doing. Yeah,
That's a great example, right? Like the only reason to make a Crysis remake right now is to see if Crysis could be, but make no mistake, the only reason you check if Crysis works as a franchise now is because we're having a resurgence of first-person shooters making so much money in multiplayer. So there's always like the long term. They need to be spending their money in a direction where they think there's more money. Otherwise, they go out of business.
true.
So I get it.
I guess in my head it was just Mass Effect is guaranteed to sell well, because I feel like everyone wants that, and I feel like it's good PR for EA. Like,
It would be good
feel
PR, that's
this is the thing
undeniable.
that they would want. And there's they make some really odd PR choices. I don't know if I've spoken about it on this show, but I feel like I bring it up sort of often. The EA Originals program, outside of Unravel, which does not count because it fell under a different umbrella, EA doesn't profit from that program. They publish the games. The developer keeps the IP. EA pays for marketing, and they basically get their money back, but any profit goes directly to the devs. For a AAA publisher, that deal is insane.
Yeah.
That means
Yeah.
that A Way Out and
pretty
Faye, there have been 2 others, I think, all of the money that they've made goes straight to those studios,
Was Sea
again,
of
aside from
Solitude one of
recouping.
those as well?
Yes, I think so.
It's relationship building as well, right? So, I mean, that's the main benefit
Yeah.
to them, is like, if one of those games blows up or one of those developers wants to make something bigger next, then it's good to have a back and forth between EA and them. So yeah, makes I think it's, but like you say, it's a very generous deal.
It's incredible, and I feel like nobody knows that, and the fact that EA doesn't talk about it seems nuts to me, because it's so good of them to do, and I feel like EA does have negative PR as a
Oh yeah,
publisher.
EA
People are
is
very
everybody.
anti-EA.
Yeah, that's like everybody. The sort of quote standard gamer, if that even is a thing. But EA is a lot of people's favorite publisher to hate. Like it's for years and years, just like the Midas touch on everything. And,
Oh, and because that's been a thing for so long, like I would say a full decade, maybe longer, that people have hated EA. I've always been like, you like their games though, right?
yeah, I mean,
And
the company
for the
stays
longest time, they loved
healthily
them.
afloat.
Yeah.
Someone's
Yeah,
buying
people
them.
still played them. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had Mass
Well,
Effect
I
and
would-
Dragon Age.
I would buy the shit out of anything Mass Effect, even after Andromeda, which I, just was so saddened by, because I was saddened by it because it didn't suck horribly. It sucked in like noticeably difficult ways, and then it had so much beautiful potential in these other ways, and I was like, this is killing me.
Yeah.
Because man, the first 3 is just one of the best like gaming experiences I've ever had, and if they remade that, I'd buy it on like everything I've got, just as a
They're incredible.
Like, throwing flowers at the stage
So
kind
would
of
I.
gesture.
Why you get those on Switch? Damn, dude.
Here's the question. So that's a different point, which I could understand. Like if you bring it to a new platform, I understand. But if a game is that good, can it not just hold up? Like what is the reason for remaking it, rebooting it, re-releasing it?
Mass Effect 1 sort of does not hold up. Half?
Then
But it's aging out in that.
It is,
I mean,
yeah.
it's
Is
got
it the
VSync
Mako
issues.
stuff? Does that really suck?
That's there.
there.
The combat is pretty obtuse.
It's also
the
just
menu.
it's just so distracting. Like it feels like there was a really big generational divide in terms of tech in the middle of the releases, because 2 and 3 are so much more polished and so much more current gen quote feeling by comparison. The first one feels like an old game that's really good, and the second and third, especially the third, feel like recent games.
Yeah.
You know, that are like that almost are practically just barely past the release cycle by comparison.
Did one exist? Did one cross a generation? Is that what happened with one? Was that in development before PS?
I think that it was, and I think that it, if I remember correctly, you had this cool thing where when you would then port to the new platform to keep your save file, you would have to answer a series of questions.
Right, yeah.
So that it would transfer between the 2 consoles.
That's right. I remember
is super
that.
cool, but
yeah.
it was originally an Xbox exclusive as well.
That's right, sorry, it was
the
Xbox
I
whole
played it on
exclusive.
bundle.
PC, so.
True, which I most recently played it on PC. And with Mass Effect, my thing is I always tell people play 1 on the easiest difficulty, get through it. I still really love that story, and then play the others normally. And
It's
I
really
feel like there's a
hard. It's really
case-
hard to do like a AAA. The first title in a AAA franchise is tough. Like
Yeah.
that's you often get that. The second one, you know how to make it. Probably you're in the middle of a console generation, so no one's throwing new hardware at you.
Assassin's Creed is a great example.
Brilliant
of,
example, yeah.
a brilliant concept that even when I was playing through that, I was like, the second game's going to be great.
Yeah.
I also had that with yeah, go ahead.
But I would say that what they did between 1 and 2 was they didn't trust that the franchise was good enough, because everyone was like, just too repetitive, too boring. It's like, okay, then let's swing super far over to the other extreme, and now let's make it GTA. Now let's make it Sims. Now let's make it. It's like, I don't give a shit about collecting art for my uncle's house. Like I don't need to do those things. And every Assassin's Creed since has lost the charm of the original one, which was just like, it's fun to climb up high, take a look around, and then from that height kill that guy. That's fun. And it became, well, now we have to do this, and now we have to constantly. It's like, just trust the fact that you're a good game. But going back to what I was saying as far as like, why do this to begin with? If you go, oh my God, that game was so good, it was so amazing, it was so incredible, is that a qualifier, or is saying for that time it was a qualifier? Or because like you look at movies, you're like, man, that movie still holds up. Like I could still watch that movie, and today it is still just as good as it was then. Or is it like, it was really good for that time, and does that determine its overall greatness? Like, just as you're saying, it kind of it doesn't hold up or whatever. Can greatness of a game degrade over time?
Yes.
I don't think so. Well, here, let me give the one sentence answer.
We got
and then
ourselves
Alana,
a
you can
debate.
rebut this. I don't think that it's that the greatness has degraded. It's the aiming sort of zone of what, you know, in which greatness falls for a player shifts somewhere else.
You're scoring
So-
on a curve, is what you're saying.
It's like if you're looking at a map and greatness is this big circle on the map, you've shifted where greatness is because tastes change, technology changes, and that informs taste, and so it's like the whole greatness of its time to me feels like it was because it was great relative to everything that was going on there, and the only way to evaluate it is to literally essentially travel back in time, because now you're comparing it against things that it never had any awareness of. You know what I'm saying? And our focus has changed.
Okay, here's where I'm going to bring it back. There are so many parents right now, and I'm one of them. I can't wait to sit Traveler down for the first time, and he's already building anticipation for this. Like, he understands the music, he understands the characters, but for the first time when he can actually sit down and watch Star Wars, that you can instantly go, I did it, by the way, you're welcome. You can instantly go, well, look, special effects have gotten better. What is compared to has gotten better. This world is now all this, but there's still parents that go, oh my gosh, that you have to watch Star. There was even a bit in This Is Us where he's like, I'm going to sit my son down and we're going to watch Star Wars, and kids still go, that, like, there's so many reaction videos of kids first finding out that Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father. It's just like that.
Spoilers,
still holds
Jesus.
up,
Spoilers.
right?
But
You know what I mean? 40
fundamentally,
years we
right,
could
the
do
problem, the difference, I would say the difference is Star Wars, the act of watching movies hasn't changed since you were a kid. So
Correct.
like you
the
sit
input
down,
technology.
it's but ultimately like the mode of interaction is what shifts. And I think that's what ages games more than anything, is we are still in the arms race. I think if you sat Traveler down and showed him a silent movie, his reaction would be different to someone who watched a silent movie when they were out. Like the idea, the sense of the medium has shifted. I think
I don't know, man.
it
I
would
think
still
it's
have
still
value for
funny.
him. He'd still watch it and go, that's really, like, he'd still like things about it in the same way as he would like, if you put Mario 64 in front of a modern gamer who never played it,
Right.
they'd still think it was cool. They'd still think the animation was fun. They'd still find it colorful and exciting. But the mode of interaction would feel
don't know if
so
they would.
antiquated.
Yeah. You like there's this whole conversation, I think, very much you know, when it comes to remastering Mass Effect, I don't want to forget about all of the people who have never played Mass Effect because they're aging into games. And I've always had this thing where if you look at the sales results every month, GTA 5 and Minecraft are generally always in the top 10 selling video games. Like, it's very uncommon that they aren't. And for the longest time, I was like, how? Who doesn't own these games? And then you remember that there are millions of people aging into video games every year.
And what do
And-
GTA and Minecraft do? They update their control mechanics as time
All the
goes
time.
forward. So they're
Yeah, I
always
mean, they
current.
constantly have updates. And, you know, very extensive fundamentals for those two games in any case. But when it comes to something like Mass Effect, I think a lot of it centers on the experiences of that person. So if you put Traveler in front of exclusively Super Nintendo games for the first year, and then
Okay.
he plays Fortnite the next year, and then he goes back to Super Nintendo, it's going to be a shift. It's like, what is this?
I know
You have to-
parents
that's
who've
essentially
done
the
that, by
point
the
I was
way.
making,
I know
though.
parents
It
who've
is also-
chronologically raised their kids.
So do I.
Genuinely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like SNES till 5. Then you get like.
Don't you
full
ever,
on.
ever call it that again.
What the
Don't
fuck you say
ever
to me?
call it that.
I'll call it whatever I like. I'll call it whatever I like.
SNES.
I call it
SNES.
SNES too, to be fair.
Oh,
That's because it's its name.
Austin?
It's because it's its name.
I've never. No, I'm with you, Troy. I'm
Thank you.
partially with you. It doesn't offend me, but it does sound very bizarre to me.
SNES, Muga Drive, Dramcast, Xbox,
Spock's.
Fox
the
is good.
PlayStation.
Lynx. I also have a Lynx. I have a Jaguar. I'll go hard, y'all. I don't care. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
I
so.
think that's an interesting
I
question.
think your point, though, of like Star Wars still holds up is that some things are transcendent of time. Like there's no denying that. But that's where I say that's why I like, if you think of it as the map analogy, like if you put a pin on the map and then you draw a circle and then you shift your circle to the left, you could potentially still shift it where that pin has not left the circle, but a bunch of other stuff will have. So it's like
That's
Star Wars
interesting.
or whatever. You know, it's not a whole 100% migration because
So your argument is that they're a classic kind of keystone thing, because that's true of like if you show Traveler the like 10 best-selling sci-fi movies that came out in the 5 years after Star Wars, bet they haven't aged as well, right? Like maybe there is, maybe Austin's right. Maybe
exactly.
you can transcend your point in.
Oh, you for
Sure.
sure can. Yeah.
history. Yeah.
But there's even like there's movies that I've tried to show, like I'm probably speaking to most people here. Austin, maybe, I don't know, but there are certain movies that came out in the late 80s, early 90s that Red Dawn. That's mid 80s. But like Red Dawn terrified me because it wasn't a movie. It was a fucking training video. It's like, this is going to happen. We're going to look out the window of our school and we're going to see Russian paratroopers dropping into our fields and taking over. I mean, that's the zeitgeist. That's where we live. So I believe that there's some things that are contextual, right? But I also wouldn't say that Red Dawn is one of the greatest movies of all time. I would say, dude, it's such a good movie. Back to the Future still holds up.
Utterly
still
perfect
holds up.
movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a perfect movie. Die Hard, perfect movie.
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters also.
Ghostbusters, perfect
yeah.
movie. But what's so funny though is that I can look at. I feel that also Hunt for Red October, John McTiernan and John DeBont, the same Die Hard team, right? Wolfgang Peterson directed. Wait, Wolfgang Peterson did.
I just remember the
Wolfgang Peterson
amazing
did.
language shifting scene. That just, oh my god, I love that film.
The best.
So
Push
good.
in. The only other one that did it better.
Did not direct.
No, Wolfgang Peterson did.
He did like
I think
Troy
he did.
and Air Force One and
Air Force One. That's what. That's
Air Force
that's the
One
other
is a
like,
perfect movie.
Air Force One is kind of a perfect movie.
I will go to the map.
trivia.
For that, yeah.
So flawed.
Trivia.
So flawed.
Jerry Goldsmith scored that movie in like 10 days.
Wow.
I think
Because the original
everyone
composer
involved
got
in that
fired,
movie did
right?
what they did in 10 days, but they did it very well. They did it very
Including
well.
Gary Oldman.
The original 100 points if you can tell me 100 points if you can tell me who the fired composer was.
It was
So the guy did Hotline Miami.
Thomas
Yes.
Newton Howard.
Thomas Newton Howard, my
I
god.
mean,
what weird alternate universe.
Sorry, James
was
Newton
it?
Howard.
Nope, no, it's a brilliant
Thomas
against
Newman.
type casting.
Well, what do we do with these 100 points if we get them? What can I
John
cash them
Williams.
You
for?
can cash them in for like custom emoji or whatever.
A
like-
full remake of Mass Effect.
No, I know this one. He died.
Nope, he's still
Fuck,
around.
never mind.
Not dead.
Oh, that narrows it down. Not Beethoven, then.
Non-dead,
Beethoven.
non-Connery. Randy Newman.
You got a plane in me.
Randy Newman, and you can hear it, and it's by and
I'm
large
just the president
amazing.
on my plane. I'm gonna
Very
go
good.
down if I do it, get away. Don't you worry about them Russians. I'm gonna let
Gary
this
Oldman
plane.
Russian.
For our audio listeners, that was Mike Bithell.
That was not Mike Bickle. Don't put that on me. That was, you could tell that
I
was
love
a
the idea that they'd
professional.
be like, that came out of Mike.
That's right.
Randy,
I've been
Randy
sitting on this
Newman?
talent for all this time of a perfect Randy
Yeah,
Newman impression.
when
Get off my plane. Get his mind to do it.
Oh, amazing.
for
Get
context,
off of my plane.
for context, when Randy's score floated out after it was tossed, Hans Zimmer, who was pretty fresh on the scene, goes, "Hey, I thought I was supposed to be the kick-ass action guy because it is a full-on crazy like ballbuster of a score. The big difference.
Can you find it?
I want to
anywhere?
hear this. I want to
not
watch
only
a
can you
fan
find
cut.
it, but not only can you find it, but on YouTube, people have married it into the scene.
That's what I
you
want.
You can see how it works, and you can see why he got fired, because the score is amazing, but he approaches it kind of like, it sounds closer to Independence Day or something, where it's a little slightly bit campy. And so it treats the president like a superhero instead of like an Americana.
But isn't that
'cause
the
Goldsmith-
film? Isn't that Air Force One? Did I watch a different? Like
yeah,
that
but
film
it looks
is
like
very.
it really, honestly, it plays like he's making fun
Is that the
of
music? It's.
Yes.
Interesting. Like he's made
By
it
the
a
way-
parody accidentally with the way
That was
it
Troy
sounds.
singing that, by the way.
Yeah,
Pam,
it
Pam
is,
to this
yeah.
day
It's 'cause,
will tell
like,
you.
Harrison Ford comes on and the music is it's almost like Superman, like da 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 dun da da, and it feels like he's.
I'm watching it.
I'm Mr. President.
Yeah,
I want to see the
it
whole
is-
movie with that score. I wanna-
No, Pam will tell you right now. I could walk in. She could literally walk through like what music is going through your head every day, and she'll be like theme for Air Force One, like blah 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 blah. There's three things that constantly I can even fuck with her a little
how
bit
have
on
we
this.
never established this, and as long as I've known her,
I don't know.
How is that not
because
come up?
that's like one of the tenements of knowing Pam is that she constantly has the theme for Air Force One going through her head.
I feel like you'd get shit done.
You would.
Like I would be motivated
Oh,
all
as
the
he did in the
time.
movie,
Absolutely.
right? As he
Yeah.
did in the movie.
Absolutely.
Like,
Armageddon,
overachiever, that
would be
guy.
the other one. Armageddon, and there's like 3 movies that she will constantly watch all the time. She'll either watch Armageddon, Air Force One, or Horrible Bosses. Like you could put those movies on in front of her.
that last
and she'd
one
be
is a really
Yeah, one of
interesting
these
one.
Talk about a
It's not like the
sway. but the other thing the other musical thing that's hilarious is if I want to fuck with her, I'll just walk up and I go 24601, and she has to finish the song from wherever. I could do anything from Les Mis, and she would be like,
Your time is up
I
and
have
your
to finish
parole
it. It's
is
like-
done.
Yeah.
You know what that means.
I like if I turn
try
this on right
Troy.
now, she would have to.
me
No,
hang
I'm
it.
not her. I can let you have your solo. I don't give a fuck. I have
Your
to finish
parole
it.
is
It's like,
done.
yeah.
You know what that means.
I like if I turn
try
this on right
Troy.
now, she would have to. No,
hang
I'm
it.
not her. I can let you have your solo. I don't give a fuck.
You
But if she
were doing a
walked in,
duet
she'd be
you
like,
just didn't show up for it.
shit.
Sucks. Oh, I love that show.
We can't. If your pitch is too
Stop a
perfect,
loaf
we
of
get a
bread.
copyright strike.
You know what's funny?
Don't worry, it's not going to be close enough to this song. to do
My
that.
my favorite Jean Valjean is actually Liam Neeson.
I've not heard his version.
He didn't sing it. It was the Victor
Oh, he did the
Hugo
book.
story. And it's a fascinating version of that. But the
All right,
Wi-
here's my
Pet-
here's my
Go.
segue. You're gonna love this. Are you ready?
love it. Go.
The version you're talking about,
Yes.
Liam Neeson.
Yes.
It's a remake.
Scored by Randy Newman.
If only. No, scored by Basil Polidoris, who also scored Hunt for Red October, and I took you off of talking about Hunt for Red October, and now we're back in.
Solid.
Now we're back to
You got that.
Here, that is your magic shelf, by the way.
The musical knowledge. You're right.
Composer
You
trivia.
you can tell me who the fucking composer. Oh my
He
god.
really does know. Yeah.
Who was the? and by the way,
Sure does
if you
work
guys
in
are
that field.
watching this, there's one advantage
like
to
it's his
watching
job.
this as opposed to just
Yeah.
listening to this is you can actually see Austin not googling.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Never has a man more visibly not typed into Google to find a piece of
Oh
information.
my god. Oh my
It's
god.
almost
just
like a lifelong obsession got turned into a profession. So you know, it's.
I mean, Austin, I think that's great.
Did
You've
you
done
guys?
good.
Did you guys not just go to the magic premonition device and wish to be an adult? Was that not how it worked for you guys?
no.
I was
Sorting hat.
10-year-old. I was
Yeah,
like,
you just went straight child to adult.
that's
You're
it.
like,
I woke up one morning and I was in my 30s.
was there
It
was there like a
horrible.
carnival machine and you put in a thing and you squeezed it and
Yeah,
it spit
I
out
just
and
wished
you
to be
it
an
been
adult,
granted.
and now that's what happened.
Also a perfect movie, except for the fact that she is 100% a pedophile.
That's true. that is again undeniable.
Elizabeth
These are
Perkins.
facts.
I feel like nobody noticed that back then. It was just so charming, and in the 80s,
was a
nothing happened. There were no laws.
No, it's the whole South Park thing where they're like, wait. There's a hot older woman that's hitting on a guy.
Nice.
Nice.
God, South Park.
We really do cover everything on this show, don't we?
I was
did.
resisting.
Greatest
I was
podcast.
I was even resisting bringing up Grey Dawn as Troy was talking about Red Dawn. So